Well, I guess then let's get going. So welcome to the latter half of the evening, where this is going to be a Q&A session with the Grin Council. If anyone has any questions, you can actually use this app. You just have to type it into your favorite web browser, preferably BAT, or the Brave browser, sorry. And if you type in this code, as the presentation goes on, you'll be able to ask questions. And in the latter half of the Q&A, we will go through with the Grin Council and answer the questions from the audience members. Now, if any of you are wondering, exits are located here, here, and here. I really feel like this is actually an aeroplane for some reason, But, I also like that this is also underground. I don't know if anyone else heard the train going over, but I really felt like, we're really building something here today. So, you're probably thinking, who the hell is this guy standing on stage talking about trains and random stuff, codes and whatnot? So my name's Jonathan Knechtel. I'm one of the co-founders of a company here in Amsterdam that's called Block Data. And what we do is we're an objective data company where we don't focus on the price of crypto-related assets, but actually we focus on tracking the technology of how all the projects are evolving. So I was asked by the organizers of this evening to actually come here on stage and actually ask the Grin Council some questions. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce one by one each of the members, and where they're going to tell a little bit about themselves and one random fact that maybe no one in this room knows. So, I'd like to start with Daniel, wherever you may be.
Hi.
Good evening, Daniel.
Hi, good
Pleasure.
evening. Nice to meet you.
So, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and one random fact?
Sure. I live in London. I am originally from Sweden and Greece, and I've been working in gaming for the past 12 years, and on Friday is my last day at work.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Going full-time on Grin.
Woo! Super. Well, thank you very much. If you'd like to take a seat at the end. Next up will be Michael. I hope I said that right.
Not a hard. It's an easy one to get right.
Super.
Hello. Hi, my name is Michael. I talked earlier. My niece Plume as well. Do you want a random fact?
Yeah.
That nobody knows. This is my fourth vodka today, so this is going to be very interesting.
Perfect. I'll take that. Next up will be John. There we go.
My name is John. I live just around the corner in Diemen. I studied here in Amsterdam, theoretical computer science. And a random fact, in January 2016, concluding a decade-long research project, I was finally able to compute exactly, down to the last digit, the number of positions in the game of Go. You can go find the exact number on my homepage.
Super. Thank you very much, John. Next up will be Jasper. Good evening, Jasper.
Hi. Hi, I'm Jasper. I'm from the Netherlands. I live near Utrecht. I did the first atomic swap between Bitcoin and Grin, and also Ether and Grin. And the random fact is, well, I guess I used to swim a lot, and maybe even like seven times a week, and that's still the only sport that I enjoy. And that's it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. And last but not least, Quentin.
Hi everyone. So my name is Quentin. So I've been working on Grin for a year and a half, and so I'm software developer at BlockCypher. And random fact. I'm French, but actually live in Montreal.
Cool.
Where did the mustache come from? You're the mustache.
Yeah.
That's new. Right?
That's new, yeah.
Brand new, just for this evening. So we're going to start super high level, and that's where the rules of this evening are. You don't have to answer every single question. You can contribute to the conversation in any way that you see fit. So it would be interesting to get your opinion, if anyone wants to share it, of where do you actually see the general blockchain ecosystem going and how it's evolving?
Okay, in my opinion, like the whole blockchain ecosystem, we've had a period, I think, of seeing a lot of coins and altcoins and experiments out there. And I think the way we're headed now, especially after this crypto winter that we're either in the middle of or coming out of or entering, whatever your opinion is, is that there's going to be a big consolidation. I think a lot of these altcoins are going to be leaving, and we're going to be left with kind of very few real contenders, and of which obviously I hope Grin is one, and I think will be, just based on its ethos. I mean, we're about new technology. We're about trying to build something new as opposed to profiting for any particular group of people. So that's my opinion. You can take it for what it's worth on where the blockchain industry is headed.
Would anyone else like to share an opinion?
Go on.
I think the crypto industry is going to have to remain a niche for some time to come. It's just not that convenient to use. I have to laugh when I see these people making predictions that it's going to wipe out fiat in 5 years or a decade. That's not going to happen. It makes wonderful research projects. In the long term, Grin has some good chances of making inroads based on its fairness, open community, and strong fundamentals. I recently had the hardest time trying to recover the funds that were on some hardware wallets of mine. It's just not user friendly. I would have trivially been able to unlock my funds if they had allowed me to try 4 pins. But after 3 attempts at remembering my pin, it locked me out, and it was such a headache. And no, this field has a long way to progress.
Well, usability-wise, we'll get a little bit on that later. So, talking a little bit more specifically about Grin, what are the real use cases that you feel Grin is going for?
So like long term, you're looking at some, basically to be a good digital alternative to cash that's programmable as well, right? Shorter term, I think that real usage will come first from users and businesses and so on that have real needs of kind of private, uncensorable electronic transactions. So I think the privacy aspects of it, and the fact that you're hiding in the crowds because it's privacy by default, is going to lead a lot of the early adoption. Over time, though, longer term, bigger picture, I don't think that users, end users care very much about privacy, but they do care about cash. And it's something that everybody's very well familiar with. And there isn't a good form of electronic cash today that has similar cash-like properties. And I think that's going to be, that's the bigger prize. Whether that's being used the same way as cash is being used today, or the way it was used 20 years ago, I don't know. I don't think that we're going to be competing with Visa anytime soon. But I do think there are real valid use cases for when you want to be able to transact with people online without leaving much of a trace behind, and without necessarily sharing information with your bank or your government or your family or circle or anything, basically.
Or your wife, definitely.
Or your wife, yeah. I mean, Michael, you know maybe a thing or two about that. But you shouldn't. It's like we've kind of, as we made the leap into the virtual way of transacting, it's kind of been assumed that by nature of doing that, we also have to give a third party access to our history of transactions, and I hope that we're going to be able to question that over the time. It's a long answer.
I just remembered one good use case. Back in April 2016, I paid over four Bitcoins, worth $5,000 at the time, to somebody I didn't know and who didn't want to be known. They had just claimed a bounty on my Cuckoo Cycle proof of work. They improved the performance almost 4 times. And
Nice.
I was able to pay them a bounty, and they were able to remain anonymous. That's a nice use case.
For sure. Would anyone else like to add anything? Well, then I will ask you another question. So one of the things that you spoke about in regards to privacy, I think is also extremely relevant. However, given the current kind of, let's say, crypto ecosystem, there are the fiat on and off ramps that allow you to actually buy and sell cryptocurrencies, which require more and more KYC and AML. I think here in the Netherlands, there's AML regulation coming out this year that's going to require, all wallets and exchanges to engage with these regulations. What is your opinion on how Grin kind of interacts with that ecosystem?
I don't think it's any issue. Often I hear that there's like concerns, what about KYC and so on, what about anti-money laundering, Grin is privacy preserving and focused on that. But ultimately, if you're, for example, trading Grin on an exchange, it's up to the exchange to follow whatever local regulations they're in, comply with KYC, comply with AML, etc. And Grin is just one of many currencies traded. And I don't really see it having any kind of impact on the coin. It's kind of orthogonal to the entire question. It's the businesses and the users in whatever jurisdiction there are that need to comply with local regulations.
And does anyone else?
And it's still possible to be paid directly in Grin, like to accept Grin directly. So you can create like some kind of economy behind it without like going to exchanges.
Right, and that's also like exactly, and you can, if you don't want to be interacting with entities that require KYC and have these restrictions on them, you can do atomic swaps, for example, as a way of getting Grins. And I think regulators are always going to have to evolve based on how technology and usage evolves as well. But always technology and usage is ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, I mean, even in the future, like we will see a lot of decentralized exchange, atomic swaps, all those stuff. So right now we are like kind of in position we have to trust an exchange, but I mean in the future we want I think we can have like some kind of decentralized exchange, and we don't have to trust or give our ID, stuff like that.
Get away with the centralized entities is the aim at the end of the day. So another question I had was, ultimately Grin did not have any form of ICO. And based on the performance and the hype that has engaged in the community, how do you guys feel that played out specifically for the Grin project?
Great.
That was kind of the answer I was expecting.
Great, yeah. I mean, it remains to be seen. Like, okay, there's two aspects here. Okay, one, it's great that we haven't had an ICO or any pre-mine or what have you, because it's allowed us to build a lot of trust with the community. I think because of the way the project has been run, nobody can point to Grin and say someone there is profiting or there's a scam going on here. I think we're absolutely beyond suspicion. The other perspective, we haven't had an ICO pre-mine. Shit, now we have no money and it's really, really hard to develop. And there's some valid criticisms out there. Well, you haven't done any, why don't you allocate some of each block to yourselves and then you'll have the funds insured to be able to continue the development as you want. And again, that's not perfect either, because even though we'd have the funds, we'd lose some of our credibility in that regard. So there's a trade-off there. In Grin's case, we've gone for the extreme no ICO, no funding, no suspicion of anything going on there. And that's, like any approach, is going to come with challenges. And that's just something we're going to have to deal with as we go on. Like, how do we keep this funded? How do we keep our developers working and ensure it keeps going? So.
Yeah, and I think also that if you were to put some kind of a dev tax or whatever, that also immediately somehow centralizes all the developers around a single entity, because there's a lot of money coming in and everyone wants a piece of that. So I think ultimately that if you want to create a new form of digital money, you don't want to have some kind of company with a profit motive behind it, because we're trying to separate money from government, but replacing it by a company isn't really better, maybe even worse, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it invites people to participate, because nobody's making any money of this, and not any more than anybody else. And so it's very easy to kind of join the community, because you're not feeling like you're taken advantage of. And in fact, by the nature of the design, and because the protocol is minimal, so it doesn't need, $200 million. Maybe it does, but then maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think it does. And instead, it kind of encourages everybody else to see, all right, just like me and Jasper, for example, we really want to be working on Grin. So we're thinking of use cases and ways to do that in order to become sustainable. And you need an ecosystem of different companies and groups and organizations and individuals all developing towards this in order for it to be a healthy ecosystem. You can't have one centralized entity having all these funds and everybody just requesting money and expecting them to build all the stuff. We won't be able, like a council of 12 or 20 people, will not be able to figure out what needs to be built for thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, millions and more.
I couldn't be happier with the fair distribution model of Grin, although I haven't been able to obtain any Grin myself even, but I plan to change that in the near future.
He keeps using my mining cards. He won't buy his own.
I mean, like the non-ICO part is one of the biggest strengths of Grin, in my opinion. I think 2 years ago, there was a lot of ICO token sale, and I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm here today. It's one of the purest projects around. So it's just an experiment on cryptography to make better money, and it's something one of our biggest strengths right now.
Nice. Well, it definitely sounds like collaboration in its truest source, which I actually find it quite inspiring, as it's maybe sets a model for what's going to happen in the future. Talking about the development of Grin so far, has there been any moments that have been exceptionally hard, and is there maybe a story behind one of those moments?
No, actually, you know what? No, not me anyhow. I mean, obviously, you look at kind of the things that some of the Bitcoin developers have had to go through, and the kind of the crap they get from crypto Twitter, completely uninformed opinions, talking about their work and what they're doing. I don't think we've had a lot of that so far. And I think that's probably a function of how good the community's been so far and how open we've been with the community, as well as how new everything is. I'm sure if things as things progress, and when we do start getting decent adoption, there's going to be more opinions weighing in and factions going on, and we might start getting to see some of that. But up until now, no, I don't think. It's actually been the best project I've ever worked on, because I've been free to just work on whatever I thought was important at my own pace, able to spend time, when you're writing code, you have to write it 6 times to get it right, and that's true no matter what kind of code you're writing. And to be able to have the opportunity to do that on a project, I think has been really, really great so far, definitely.
Nice. Any other stories, maybe, of the development? There has to be more than one.
No, it's been so good that there's no...
Have you been paid to say that?
It's been horrible watching on the sidelines. Yeastplume writing code 6 times over. That was a joke.
I'm kind of an amateur GPU coder. So the first GPU miner I wrote was a port of the CPU miner, which was horribly complex. So I had a lot of headaches getting that working and debugging it. It was using unaligned accesses, which is terrible. So when Photon, who is president now, was able to make a 4 times faster GPU miner, I was mostly happy because it was a much simpler miner. And I'm much happier now working on the code.
Nice.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is when you arrive on Grin, which is written in Rust. It's me at the beginning. It's Rust. It's complicated. So you have to fight with the compiler. You have to fight with a borrow checker. So I think which is one of the biggest challenges that I faced. And everyone in this room wants to start writing pull requests for Grin. You will see that it's not easy to write Rust, but it's really, really efficient.
Cool. And has there been a particular favorite moment so far in the history of Grin, if you to look back at one of the happier times? But it sounds like it's all been happy, so I think it's an irrelevant question.
I think the launch, because we did a lot of work on trying to ensure a fair launch, and a lot of talk about this, and I think the launch was actually fair in the end. Like we set the difficulty extremely high initially to make sure that no one, the first person in with their mining farm runs away with the first 1,000 blocks. And we set it, and it worked exactly as we thought it would. As in, it should take an hour for the first block, and then a bit less for the next block. And it actually went exactly as we tried. So that was actually a big win, I think. Yeah. That was a good moment.
Yeah, and launching a coin fairly in 2019 is not trivial. Especially given the amount of attention and eyeballs that we had, and we didn't really know because there was a lot of lurkers and not everybody was kind of showing making themselves announced. So to be able to design a launch in a way that was truly fair, or what seems to be very fair, was a great accomplishment. I think it's very good.
Well, I think we can all agree it went fairly well. So.
Equal, I should say also equal opportunities, not equal outcome, right? Because there's a lot of miners that have better resources and are better equipped to profit from Grin, but that's inevitable in any case, and this is the way the world works in a way.
Does anyone actually have any insights to where the name Mimblewimble came from? Did I miss that earlier?
It's come from Harry Potter, from the book. So I don't know exactly like it's like spell.
Tongue-tying curse.
Tongue-tying curse, like one sentence in Harry Potter somewhere, I think.
Like
basically.
to reveal the location of the.
It basically prevents you from revealing some information, which is very applicable to.
Well, there we go. Maybe I'm the only person in the room that didn't read that online.
You'd have to ask J.K. Rowling how she actually came up with.
Yeah. She's like a Latin scholar or something. Like she's some. I don't know.
Well, that's a fun fact.
There was some justification to her choice of using it. So
cool. I'm looking for the next question. You mentioned that the end users are very clumsy in regards to keys and security. Is this something that you're factoring into the development of Grin in the future, or you're keeping in the back of your mind?
Well, I think right now it's very important to lay a very good foundation that can support all use cases and everything, and definitely at some point we have to make everything very smooth and easy to use, and but that's going to take a bit of time. I mean, well, we definitely realize it, but realize that it's important, but it's something for the future.
I would also say that based on what Michael was showing in his presentation before as well, core Grin protocol maybe is not. The focus is not to be consumed by end users, maybe as much as building tools and services to be consumed by wallet developers and other product and service developers that in turn then will extend services to end users. And it's more a challenge for them rather than the core protocol level, which again aims to be very minimal in its design and also not prescriptive. So it's not like, I don't really see the core protocol saying, okay, this is how we're supposed to handle keys, for example. It's more for other layers to figure out how to best do that. And Grin instead focuses on doing transactions in a very performant and privacy-preserving and secure way.
The infrastructure,
Exactly. Exactly.
If we succeed in making Grin an alternative for cash rather than a hodling vehicle, then people won't be carrying too many funds, and losing the keys to your wallet will be like losing a $100 bill, rather than your kid's college fund.
But it also wouldn't be possible to do this in a different way. So if we had done like a 200 million ICO, and we said, we were just going to do core protocol, and somebody else needs to build a wallet, there would have been a lot of friction in the community because they say, hey, come on, we raised all this money, you need to build everything now. Instead, now it's very obvious that we were not going to be doing that, and it's very understandable, I think, by the community, and others are stepping up to the plate to do that.
Cool. Well, a question building up, unless you had something else that comes off the back of that after sharing some features earlier. I was wondering if you guys have a kind of internal wish list of the features that you want to. Is it also managed by the community in terms of the prioritization of what needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, internal wish list. I mean, there's nothing internal. Like, it's all very open. It's all out there. It's like my own example, like I've just done a lot of work on the wallet recently, and that's kind of what I'm focused on at the moment. And my wish list is out there. Like I put up an issue on GitHub saying this, and this is going to happen. This is what I'm doing, and it's open for comment and what have you. And I think I don't think anyone has any kind of hidden features they want in the back of their head. It's all very much out in the open. You know, like I said, we don't actually have a roadmap, but I think if you care enough, you can go through all of our issues and all of the discussions there, and you can see kind of where kind of the main developers are thinking and the direction we're headed in. Yeah.
Cool.
I have one wish, which is that quantum computing turns out to be infeasible. That would keep Grin a lot simpler.
Hashtag life goals. And then there's one of the last questions I have is in regards to the so-called infinite supply and the emission. I was wondering if maybe you could bring some clarity to that. Also, why that decision was made, how you see it evolving in the future, if it's a hard rule that will never change.
Grin has infinite emission. Deal with it.
Yeah, I think one of the. I mean, a lot of the coins, they have these halvings, and so we actually don't know what will happen with all of those coins in like maybe 5 or 10 years in the future when there's barely any emission, and the miners still they still want to make their profit. So my personal expectation is that probably the fees will go up, which will make it less usable. So I think having this constant emission actually helps with transaction fees, and it also secures the network in a way, I think. And I mean, and I think also that in long term, it's actually not that much different from maybe Bitcoin in the sense that we still have a relative dropping supply. It just never goes to zero. There's always like a baseline of emission.
But yeah, over time, it basically goes towards zero to the point where it might as well be zero. And if you ask me, I would have probably want more inflation or coin emission over time, because I think it does make sense to have that, especially when you start accounting for coins lost and if you're trying to make a transactional medium. But the good thing, I think, is that general perception seems to be that, there's this crazy inflation, so all this Grin is worth nothing, which I think is a great opportunity to use Grin then, because you have no opportunity cost compared to if you feel like tomorrow it's going to be worth 10 or 100 times more, then you probably don't want to be transacting with it. So I think it does well for its to support the core use case of transacting with Grin. The infinite supply has there was somebody who was more skilled at crypto marketing than me, but they coined it, but they said it as a nice meme to it, time is money. Time is infinite as well. Just like the supply.
Is it?
I don't know.
In economic terms, finite versus infinite doesn't make any real difference. I mean, all coins start with very high inflation and end with low inflation. In the first 4 years, Grin has exactly the same emission model as Bitcoin. In the next 4 years, it's a little bit different. And it reaches low inflation a few decades later than Bitcoin. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the emission is set in stone. It's perfectly predictable, and it's guaranteed to become very, very low and insignificant. That's what distinguishes it from fiat. That's all that matters.
Yeah, there's this notion out there, like we see this a lot, and this is the thing that probably annoys me the most, is people, their argument is basically, well, Satoshi said it should be this way, and this is how it shall be. And no, like this was the word of God handed to Moses on a tablet, to Satoshi saying you should have a limited emission curve on your coin, and that's utter nonsense. Like Satoshi was an engineer like any of us here with no knowledge of the future, and at the time, absolutely, it seemed like a good choice. It's something that had never been tried before. Make a limited emission coin. Make sure when you're issuing a new coin, make sure that there is a limited supply and guaranteed to be a limited supply. Great, and when we've seen what happens with that, you get hyper-deflation, you get people hoarding and not spending it. The paper was like a digital replacement for money. It was supposed to be digital cash, and then the justification, now it's a store of value, and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, like he couldn't see into the future. In my opinion, like what we're trying now is like a very, very, very limited inflation. Imagine if you could only mint $60 US a minute, you'd have hyper-deflation, like in the same way. So from my perspective, like this is an experiment, like any other, with no knowledge of the future, and I think it's a very conservative experiment in that it's only a very, very small and limited emission curve coming out of it. So I don't think there's anything really to get upset about here, or to, you know, like John said, it's predictable, so you can price that into whatever you want.
It's quite shocking that it took 10 years to come up with the simplest possible emission model, constant reward. It's
simple and it works. Well, we don't have to say it works. It's simple, and you can understand it anyhow. Yeah.
Simple is fair.
Mankind likes to overcomplify things, I think. So that was all of my questions I had so far, and now we go to the audience questions. This is what I expected. They're a little bit technical. So one of the first questions that's asked is, in the Grin transaction files, there is a participant data code that collects data about the sender up to the IP address and email. Is this true?
No.
Okay, next question. No.
I don't know where that came from. That must have been Crypto Twitter, that question. Yeah.
Pardon?
Was that a Crypto Twitter question? Because that sounds like one.
It was from Igor FM. Let's not antagonize or whatever the word is.
Sorry.
If it doesn't absolutely need to be on the blockchain in order to be able to verify things, then it is not on the Grin blockchain.
Okay, the next question that I have here is, are there any plans to look at implementing staking mechanisms for Grin?
No, and I'll give this to John because he's much...
Depends. I mean, what is meant by that? I'm not sure what is meant. Is it like
it's from anonymous?
To fund projects? Maybe anonymous question asker. If that case, you know,
I thought it was proofless.
Staking mechanism to me sounds like, you know, at least I'm going to answer the way I interpret the question, and that is that there's, you know, an ability to stake certain projects or tasks or whatever to be carried out. And in that case, there are no immediate plans, but if somebody wants to build that and support that, I fully approve.
Yeah, if we're talking about proof of stake, I would say definitely no. Yeah, so it fundamentally changes the security or the assumptions you're making on your blockchain.
So, like I mentioned in my talk, proof of work serves two purposes. One is to reach consensus, but equally important is to distribute the coins, and you want to distribute the coins as fairly as possible. The moment you switch to proof of stake, you no longer have fair distribution. You're saying these people who have coins now, they're going to be able to keep their share of coins until eternity, unless they choose to sell it, and everybody else outside has to buy it from them. In Grin, everybody until the end of time has the option to buy, to mine Grin, and to do it under the exact same conditions as the very first miners that were present at launch. That's the fairness we want to achieve.
Yeah, I would say so. Like with proof of work, you have to burn like real value. You have to burn electricity into a system. So yeah, you bring value into the system, which is really different from proof of stake.
Cool, thank you. Another question also from Anonymous, this guy's really on fire tonight, is what are the concrete plans to the Cockatoo algorithm updates? Maybe I said it wrong, I'm sorry.
That was actually one of the topics under discussion in today's governance meeting.
There we go. Rewatch the live stream.
Originally, I planned to make our primary proof of work focus on the memory bottleneck, which means that since chip capacities grow over time due to Moore's law, we would also need to increase the memory requirement on our proof of work in order to enforce the memory I/O bottleneck. So we set up a so-called phase-out schedule, where the smaller smaller graph sizes would be phased out at some point in time. But to our shock, they announced an ASIC for Cockatoo 31 that's a single chip with an unheard of amount of memory, 0.5 gigabyte, where before nobody made chips having more than, I think, 160 megabyte. So some companies claim that this is still not possible. You can announce it, but we don't think you can have good enough yield to make this economically feasible. So with this uncertainty in place and with other things that make me reconsider the arguments for focusing on the memory I/O bottleneck, I propose to put a freeze in place on the scheduled phase-outs, at least from Kakadu 32 onwards, and see how these actual ASICs play out in practice. So we may possibly have a permanent proof of work in Kakadu 32, which would be then probably be having 1 gigabyte ASIC chips.
We should also say that this is still heavily under discussion, right? Yeah, exactly. Even today it wasn't discussed in the governance meeting, and I'm sure it will be discussed in the following meeting. So, if you have hardware knowledge, or if you're maybe manufacturer or whatever, we definitely value your input either in these meetings or in the forums. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that seems to be like the general hardest challenge. Part of the hardest challenge with the project is, managing proof of work in a fair way, and the balance of having multiple proof of works and some considerations that John mentioned and so on, and being able to adapt to developments, technological developments, just like the one you mentioned, and also what was announced today, which kind of counteracts a lot of that to some extent as well. It's a tricky situation. There's many different stakeholders, and everybody's very opinionated because everybody has financial gains in it, and you're trying to make decisions that are good for the coin in the long term, rather than specific interests.
Cool. Thanks. And I have one last question, and I'd like to get an answer from each and every one of you. That's where someone asked, is there a reason why you guys chose to develop for the Grin ecosystem and not, for example, Bitcoin?
For me, it was, I've been following the space for a long time, and never got involved in any crypto project before, and since until last year, about a year ago, when I started reading and finding out more about Grin and getting involved. And for me, it was the community that sucked me in, basically. First, I found some presentations by Andrew Polstra and so on, explaining Mimblewimble, but once I started reading more about it, and the fact that there was it was a fair launch and everything, and it was very heavily under development and not shy to try new technologies and new approaches, which I think tipped a bit the scale for me and made me feel like, okay, this is something I want to be part of as a journey. Doesn't mean that Grin is going to necessarily be the end, project. I'm sure there will be other projects with more novel approaches in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, or even sooner than that. But it seemed to me like a right time to get involved in a project that I could actually be okay with speaking at a conference in a Q&A and attaching my name to without feeling ashamed of myself, and without having necessarily too many dogmas or kind of arguments that are not necessarily founded on like scientific principles, and more of like normatory discussions as you see in other projects.
Cool. Yeah, for me personally, I just like the fact that it's built up from the ground. It's not like we forked the Bitcoin code or whatever and then put some Mimblewimble stuff on top. It's basically from the ground up, and incorporating a lot of very new and cutting edge technologies that maybe someday some of them end up in Bitcoin, but that will take many years. And I like it way more when you can have a bit more of a speed. And I think at some point that will also slow down a bit in Grin, of course, as it matures more. But
Cool. Thank you.
So I'm very much into simplicity and elegance, and the Mimblewimble paper was a bombshell to me because it delivers that in spades. Of course, also the fact that Ignotus chose to use Cuckoo Cycle as proof of work, that totally sealed the deal for me. I was more than anxious to contribute.
Cool.
Yeah. From my perspective, if you're a developer and you're interested in getting into cryptocurrency, it's actually really hard to find one that you kind of feel like you want to put some effort towards. One, because most of them are for profit, so why am I going to put my time in and someone else profits? Secondly, I mean, there's Bitcoin, but good luck getting your PR accepted into Bitcoin. It's going to, it's going to have to be really significant, and it's going to have to, pass tons and tons of review. Whereas we're kind of in a much earlier phase with Grin. There's a lot more it's a bit more nimble. Say, I mean, Bitcoin. I mean, it's that way rightfully so because there's so many users of it. And it's so huge at this point, so it necessarily needs to be more conservative. Getting involved with something like Grin meant you can get in kind of at ground zero almost, and while there's still time to modify and change and experiment. So for me, that's why I chose to work on Grin.
Yeah, for me, I think there is two things. The first is like the experimental aspects. It's like we are using like cutting edge cryptography. We are using like even like if there is something new, we like implement it like bulletproof stuff like that. So it's like really like we follow the papers, we follow like all the research application, and we try to implement it. So it's like that will be like an exciting part in that. And the second one is like I think the community. So like the fact that you can contribute very easily and like people will accept like your work will be very welcoming. So I think at the beginning I didn't wanted to contribute as much as I did, and it's because of the community.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for your answers, and I hope you guys learned something from this Q&A session. And if you have any other questions, I'm sure you can either reach them at this event, or there's also this thing called the internet. It's great. You can find them there. So thanks a lot, guys.